We are lighting the candle, a world that works. I am here, Bill Carell, with Jan Jeremias and Lisa Sheehan, two of my favorite people to have conversation with. And as you know, or you may not know, we get together, periodically, usually every week or so, and we just talk. We kind of share thoughts with each other, and I think the interesting part of that is for all of us, we never know exactly what we're going to be talking about because it's not scripted. And at the same time, we've found that pretty much anything that we talk about is pretty much an entree into a room that none of us was predicting we would go in. And so everyone gets to share what they brought with them, be reminded of things that they'd forgotten that they knew, or share something recent that made a difference in you know, their study or some group that they belong to. I'm in that group of they, by the way. So let me just open by saying this: we're once again heading into the holiday season. And when I had a company and I would send everybody home for Thanksgiving, and I would say, I do want you all to remember that where you're going this weekend is not the real world. You're going to go home to experience the trauma of your youth with the original cast. Just remember, it'll be over in a little while. Enjoy the heck out of it and find the humor in every circumstance where you think you're possibly going to be angry, and then come back and tell us all about it. And so when we got together after Thanksgiving, one of the things, we all sit down and everybody have their coffee, and we set aside an hour or two to just kind of clear our heads of what the holiday was all about. And it's kind of interesting from another perspective, and that is that a lot of the folks that used to be there for all of the holidays are just not there anymore. They're either in other parts of the world. I've got a sister who is out running around the world. She's been on a so far 90 days combination of a cruise slash European tour slash going to the Far East and whatever. And so she's going to be doing this for 6 months. This was
Wow.
it was a deal that she and her husband planned on doing, but Ray didn't make it. He passed away just about a year ago, and so she's doing it anyway. And I give her props and more power to her. Um, I think the other interesting part of it is that there are some of us who are going into this holiday without some of our relatives for the first time, and that will have its own set of challenges. And there's a real kind of a comic angle to how my last couple of Thanksgiving and Christmases have gone, because having a father with fairly advanced dementia, but not out there completely, um, there were some funny, neat things to share and learn from each other, even at this advanced age. So, enough about me. I mean, what do the holidays say to you two folks?
Well, we're having an interesting switcheroo, so that we can all be together. We're moving our Thanksgiving to Friday.
Nice.
Yeah, I was worried because that my mother wouldn't go for it because then what will she do on the actual holiday? But my sister and her husband, it's his family's holiday, and we've never get to spend it with them too. So this was kind of a solution because those of us that work, or most of us have the day off that work.
Right.
So, and then my niece was able to switch her day. So it kind of it works out. So I'm happy about it, and so it should be a good one.
It sounds wonderful. And how many of you will be there all together?
It's ours is small, so it's my parents, my two sisters, their husbands, well, one current and one ex, and my nephew, my two nephews and my niece. So that should be, and it's not like my dad's got 47 years of sobriety. He just celebrated last week.
That's awesome.
So it's not a big drinking fest or anything like that. So we don't have any of those stories, thank God.
Well, there's something to be said about how alcohol tends to, allow the stories to become more elaborate than perhaps might have actually occurred, and or for things to totally get made up, and for people to take different points of view. So that's interesting because my mom, when she passed in 2012, she had 40 some years of sobriety at that point too. She was 78 years old, and so that was something she was very proud of. Um,
Mhm.
there was no need in her world for anybody to be anonymous any longer. The stigmatism that was there probably in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, it's just not that way any longer. I think people um, who are in that work are supporting each other in all walks of their lives, although they don't usually give their last names. I think they all become better friends than that, if you will.
Oh yeah, they're my father's best friends. I mean, they're basically his only friends are those that are, because he goes 3 times a week still, and yeah.
Yeah, there's been lots of really good outcomes, including 4 or 5 small books that I'm aware of. I can't tell you for sure who I got them from or who was responsible for writing them down, but they were entitled "Things Heard at an AA Meeting." Number one, number two, number three, number. So they were just sayings, and what people would. So no real in depth coverage of anything, but simple stuff like, wherever I go, there I am, or something along those lines. And shit
Yeah.
happens, which is a real, it's a very interesting way to just kind of like explain all the things in your life. I think John Lennon said it more eloquently by saying, life's what happens while you're busy making other plans, but it's just another form of shit happens, right? So I think the main thing about all of this is that's wonderful that you've got plans to be with family and you're accommodating schedule and your mom's going along with it and your dad's going to be there and your mom and dad still together at this point.
No,
No, okay.
they
And
haven't
they're
been
still,
for years.
do they still show up for uh, holidays together, that sort of
Oh,
thing?
yeah, they probably get along better now than they did when they were married.
That's fun.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah. No, and especially once the grandkids came along, then it was a must.
absolutely. Those are the things that you can't live without. And yeah, you can hold your breath and your nose for a little while, and then sooner or later, it's like it just doesn't matter anymore. It's like, okay, it's you again.
Yeah, I can't believe they've actually been separated, well, divorced, well, apart for 25 years. So that's
Yeah,
been
yeah.
deep.
And Jan, when you think about the holidays, or when you're thinking about these holidays that are upcoming, what's kind of foremost and at the front for you?
Um, well, I actually don't for Thanksgiving. I haven't been. I've been with that, like not with my family more than I've been with my family. One of my brothers doesn't celebrate Thanksgiving. Doesn't really celebrate any non-Jewish holidays. So, or secular holidays. So he doesn't do so like I haven't seen him in many years. And my other brother always lived, far away from me until now. So I was always with friends on Thanksgiving. That was, I had one friend, we were very close, and I would always spend Thanksgiving with her and her family. Was always, was always wonderful. I mean, it's actually my favorite holiday. I love Thanksgiving. I love the idea of Thanksgiving. Um, Anything that revolves around gratitude to me is a plus, you know, is a real plus. And so this year, I actually have no idea what I'm doing. I'm not really quite sure. So we'll see, we'll see what happens.
Well, for the information of the house, we're doing something a little bit different this year. It will be my blushing bride of 47 and a half years and me. Um, I don't know if we'll be invited anywhere else. We haven't as of yet, but she was reading about kosher turkeys. And so we've looked that up and we have one on order through Stop and Shop, I believe. And these are great turkeys. I think it's about 12 to 14 pounds, which is plenty big enough for the two of us. Although back in the day, we got as close to 30 as we could get. I don't think we ever had a 30 pounder. I've never seen one. 26, 27 pounds. Yeah, we had those several times. And then a couple of times we had two turkeys, depending on how many folks we had coming over. No, it's just the two of us. We kind of like looking at each other and preparing the food together and, kind of going through that whole ritual. And we, uh, we got some, um, completely organic turkey breast about 4 years ago. And it was, I think, $6.50 a pound, right? So, I mean, this is like, uh, I can get filet or prime rib or something like that for that kind of money at BJ's. And so it was really, really, really good. And so this year we're looking forward to it because it's supposed to have many of the same properties in terms of being uh, non-GMO, all of that, very healthy and raised in a good. Well, I mean, it's kosher. What else can you say about it, right? So we're looking forward. I'll have a report for you.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, and the other holidays, I mean, I don't celebrate Christmas, so Hanukkah is quite different than Christmas.
Yes.
What are
So
the dates this year, Jan?
I think it's December 7th is the first night. It's early.
Yeah. Oh,
And,
yeah.
and like December 13th or 14th or something. I don't know, I'm debating about spending some time with my mom because usually we always light candles on the phone together on Zoom, or
Mm.
on the phone together, and we have for many years. But now without my dad, I don't know, it just feels like we should be together, the two of us. So I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm thinking about that. So yeah.
That's an important consideration. Yeah, I mean, so clearly there's no calculus for either my wife or me. We're both orphans at this point. She has been since 1995. So if you can, appreciate that. Her dad passed in 83, um, about 2 months short of his 84th birthday. And her mom passed in 1995, living with us, and she passed here at the home. And my mom went through a really unceremonious fight. I mean, it was definitely a Dylan Thomas exit. She did not go gently into that good night. God bless her. She went. She got a lot of doctoring because she was a little bit paranoid with regard to her health and everything. But they completely missed that she was at advanced stages of cancer.
Yeah.
How they missed that, I have no idea, but she was diagnosed at the end of June in 2012, and she passed October 13th. That 90 some day period after we started, going through, radiation therapy and all the rest of that was probably some of the closest time I've ever had with my mom. Thank God for the fact that I had my own business. And I had a good staff of people working with me, and we just concentrated on her care and making sure that she was happy. And I will not mince words with you. She was one demanding SOB. Okay. And there was never a time when we showed up that she didn't have a list of wants that she sent me back out into the world to go joyfully get for her. Not the least of it was the chocolate Wendy's Frosty. And where she was where she was over in Manchester at the hospital over there. Wendy's was about 4 or 5 blocks away, so it was no big deal for me to hop in the car and go get her a Frosty. But I always waited because my mother, not in addition to being very demanding, she never wanted anybody to think they had her figured out. So sometimes it was a Frosty, sometimes it was a banana split from Shady Glen. There were like 4 different things. And of course, with all of her AA friends out there, she would just post something on Facebook like, I my sunglasses are not here anymore. I think someone walked off. And by the 2.5, 3 hours later, there'd be 5 pairs of sunglasses that different people brought in from all over the world to make sure Gail was taken care of, or Charlie, as she called herself. So there are those opportunities to tell stories, and to reminisce and remember. And the truth is that my brothers have huge families now with tons of grandchildren. I mean, they both have more than 6,
Mhm.
and so they're all their holidays are just wall to wall doing whatever with their sons, daughters, and all that. So there's my adopted family, my best friend, Bob Kulik, his son, and his daughter. And we've spent, out of the last 10 years, we've probably gone to 5 Thanksgivings over there with them. And now that Bob's not here any longer, it's just really kind of I don't want to say interesting, but it's kind of like an off balance time with regard to predicting how it's going to go and having any kind of an idea. So I'm looking forward to it. And I don't know about if you're aware of this, if you follow my postings on Facebook at all. I am typically out of bed every single morning by 4 o'clock, usually between 3:30 and quarter to 4. I roll out. I come down here, get the water started, and then I'll spend the better part of 45 minutes just quietly sitting and thinking, or having thoughts mostly, but sometimes it turns into thinking.
But I like what you said, Bill, about like not having any plans. This year for Father's Day, I was really nervous. It was my first Father's Day without my dad. I was really nervous about. Um, I think I mentioned that within a certain, well, for us, the first year you don't go to the cemetery after somebody dies. For some people, it's their custom. So it was kind of like, well, what am I going to do to honor my dad? And I just got up that day and did everything that we would have done together as a kid. Like, that's what I did. And it was the best day. The best day, no plans. Like I was like, I'm just going to get up and see how I feel. And if I feel like going out and doing something, I'm going to do it, but no pressure or no obligation to feel like I had to do something. And it was the best day. And I'm kind of looking at Thanksgiving like that in a lot of ways. Like, we'll see what happens, but I'm really okay with just having it be a me day.
Mhm.
You deserve that. And I love what you're saying, because while you're saying it, I'm thinking to myself, that's kind of how I live every day these days. I look at well, I look at my scheduled stuff on my calendar like, oh, that's an obligation, like a loose end. I haven't done it yet. And it's like there are a few things that I just get really excited when I see certain people's names. Oh, I'm going to spend time with her or him. Wow, that's going to be a great day. And then sometimes they call up and say, "Hey, I'm busy doing something else," or the kids got mono, or something like that. The best laid plans. But I like what you said. If you could live every day that way, getting out of bed in the morning and just doing what feels natural, no pressure, no need to keep track of the list or anything of that nature. It's like, oh yeah, okay, so that's done. Now we can. Well, we'll take a minute and maybe just have a cup of coffee and just see what comes next. Let's see what shows up.
That kind of goes along with like, every moment is a decision you make anyhow, but we're so used to being on autopilot that we don't realize we have choice all the time, often. And one of my philosophy class, we're talking about making decisions, and then I was listening to Michael Singer that wrote on Untethered Soul talk to some, and he said, well, and he was talking to the person that was interviewing him in a podcast, and he said, well, how many choices do you have in the next minute? And she, you know, rolled her eyes towards the heavens. She goes, well, I guess it's infinite. He goes, yeah, that's right. So every moment is a choice you can make, and like you said, to have a whatever kind of day you want, which is cool.
Yeah, I mean, Bill has I don't often have that in my life. I tend to have a lot of scheduled stuff, especially
Yeah.
these days. But the but the I guess one is shifting your perspective about it because I could years ago I probably would have been bummed that I had no plans, and so just
Yeah.
shifting and making a choice to say, okay, well, this is so just be different. It'll be what it's going to be, and I'll do what I feel like doing. But this so that's part of it, and I was thinking about that this week as I've been doing a lot of things where I'm like stepping out of my comfort zone and doing a lot of different things. Like the other day, we had an audio event. We were actually cooking on the audio event. So
Nice.
we were talking about what we were making, and people actually got together. Like we asked people to like chime in, and so it was actually a lot of fun. But we get on and with one of the women I collaborate with, and we have no idea sometimes how this is going to go or whether it's going to work or not. We'll be like, you know,
What'd you
My
make?
suspicion.
we made
Go
we
ahead.
made we made soup. We made soups. We were talking about the health benefits of soup, and you know,
Well,
um, so Laura talked about the veggies and what like that, and I talked about the herbs and the spices and different health benefits and what they interact with and kind of thing. So it was a lot of fun.
So this is an interesting thing. I've got to get an answer to this, or I will not be able to continue my life effectively.
Okay.
So, being raised in a Jewish household, what do you substitute for chicken soup when you're a vegan?
Oh,
mhm.
yeah, you don't. I mean, I make a lot of other soups. I don't usually make anything that's like chicken. I mean, I'll do vegetable soup, mushroom soup, like a lot of other veggie type soups.
Yep.
But you know, there's
Well,
no, there is no chicken soup in my house.
my mother always called it Jewish penicillin,
Yep, it's
chicken
true.
soup. Yeah.
Well,
And
now if you look at all the documentation on bone broth and the health benefits of bone broth,
yeah,
you kind of understand that, you know. So
I'm not aware of that. So say some more, please.
yeah, there was just it was just I follow a woman named her last name is Nadu. She's a doctor out of Harvard, I'm pretty sure, and she's written a number of books on the microbiome. And I think one of her books is "This Is Your Brain on Food," and it talks about different emotional, like different conditions, stress, anxiety, ADD, ADHD, and some other things, and related to your gut. And so she wrote, I just was reading one of her blogs, and she was talking about bone broth being really good for your microbiome. And I
Right.
was like, oh, okay. Well, that kind of just whole idea, the salts, the like, the electrolyte balance and things like that, which also the collagen and the other components in the protein that tends to be in bone broth. So it's actually very nutrient dense.
Yeah. I understand marrow is supposed to be one of the best things for your brain. Brain absolutely requires fat, and marrow, I think, is very fat intensive.
Yeah, your brain does require healthy fats.
Exactly. So
And
that, yeah.
mhm. So but yeah, I eat a lot of other, but there was no substitute for chicken soup. I manage without it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I doesn't really most of the time I don't miss much. I don't like miss meat and I don't miss anything. And I think sometimes I miss the idea of it more than I miss the actual like I miss the idea of a really good like Romanian pastrami sandwich with like
Mhm.
brown mustard. Like the idea of it sounds really good. I think if I ate it, I would probably get really sick. But the idea of
I
it,
should
my
pumpernickel.
memory of it is really, really vivid. Like
Oh,
my
yeah.
my mouth starts to water, you know? Like, yeah.
And a nice Jewish rye with caraway seeds. Yeah. No doubt.
Exactly. My father's favorite bread. Oh gosh.
Have you spent much time down in New York City at all?
Me? I lived in the city and worked in the city for, oh gosh, 20 or 30 years.
So there's a restaurant um, over by 38th and Madison. It's like one block off of Madison. I can't remember what the name of that one is, but it is called um, pastrami and corned beef. What? What's the sandwich called?
Reuben.
Reuben. It's called Reuben's. Apostrophe S. I haven't been there in 20 years, but I went there like 19 times in one year because I was down there every Friday for a course that I was doing. And I probably had almost every single time. The thing that really made their Reubens was the bread and their own sauerkraut. They cured their sauerkraut right there in the restaurant, and they had a ventilation system to take the smell of the sauerkraut, with the yeast and all the rest of that stuff out of the building. Nobody would be coming in there at all.
Right.
But it was just so fresh and so pungent, and it actually bit my tongue a little bit. It was really wonderful. I still remember that experience all these years later.
Hmm.
And they had really, really nice service staff. Most of them had been there 15, 20 years, and they all knew the menu upside down and sideways, and then could also say, if you want to do this, he can make this happen for you. So that's when you knew you were with the band.
Fond memories.
Yeah. I have the guy I started my business with back in 1989, Dan Stafford. Within the first 2 years after we got together, he decided that he was going to be vegetarian. I don't think either one of us had ever heard the word vegan at that point in 89 or 90. It's probably was out there, but it wasn't, something we talked about. And he said at first, was because he was very concerned about eating animals, more than anything. And then later on, he said, I can't even begin to tell you how different this makes me feel. He said, I just feel clean. I feel alert, I feel energetic and vivacious. And I said, that's really cool. I said, you want a steak? He said, yeah.
Oh,
So he would have what he called his vegetarian vacations. And there might be a pastrami or a corned beef Reuben in there somewhere, but every once in a while, definitely a very rare steak, maybe a couple of times a year. And if I was blessed, then it would have been with me, but sometimes he stepped out and did it with other people that weren't his business partner.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I said, like I said, most of the time, I mean, especially on a holiday like Thanksgiving, which to me, all the sides are better than the turkey. Like you don't need any of the. I mean, and so to me, the turkey is not necessary because you have everything else you eat on Thanksgiving, which is just phenomenal.
Well, you can't bring it up without us really diving deep into this now, Jan, so tell me the ones that you're thinking of. And I think we all can chip in on this.
I mean, even stuffing that's like vegetarian stuffing. I mean, you don't need to have it be in the turkey, cornbread or corn pudding. I mean, all the carbs that I don't tend to eat during the year
Right.
because they're too like it's the only meal where you eat like 6 carbs in the same meal.
Yeah.
So
yeah. They said it's not the tryptophan in turkey that makes people fall asleep. It's all the carbs. They just blame it on the tryptophan.
All the blood goes to your stomach. Yeah.
And I don't know. There's always good veggies, but it's a lot of the other stuff. It's delicious. Cranberries, I make a cranberry crumble. Yeah,
It's
cranberry nut bread. So it's all the really good carbs.
Well, the one that I always remembered, like when I first went to Thanksgiving at my grandmother's house back in 19, golly, that would have been like 1959. We flew there from Denver, Colorado to Detroit, Michigan. And she went all out. She was one of the best cooks ever. My mom was always trying to copy what my grandmother Elsie would do. And she made, and my dad to last year, he mentioned it again. He said the thing I could never stand was my mom made these candied yams and they were just so sickening sweet and blah 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 blah. And I said, you know what, Dad, that's what made me believe that Thanksgiving was a good thing.
Mhm.
You get to have dessert right in the beginning of the meal. So here's the neat part. Do you know what a yam actually is?
What family?
No, it's an African plant. It is not a sweet potato. A yam, you can look this up, and you folks at home fact check me on this. We just learned this in the last week or two. Jan and I were talking about yams, and so we went and looked it up. It turns out that it is an African vegetable. It's in a different family entirely, but it is kind of a yellowish orange plant, and it would have been brought here. The term would have been brought here, during the 16 and 1700 those 2 centuries, with all of the African slaves being brought to the United States. And so it's just been traditional that that's gotten placed on top of candied yams, like that's what sweet potatoes are, right?
Mm.
And no, this is an interesting thing all by itself. And when I say interesting, I don't mean thought provoking. I also mean worth the time to put the study into some of the etymology of some of these words, where they come from and how they got into our. It's actually an icon of Thanksgiving, a candied yam. And I don't know how many people actually know that it's really something quite different.
Because people always interchange them like they're interchangeable. I think even the grocery store does that.
Agreed.
Yeah, but I think that then it got to be where all of a sudden you had different sort of types of sweet potatoes and different types of yams depending on where you're shopped, and they might like have them be like Japanese sweet potatoes and some of like the best sweet potatoes, and I could never I've only found them a few times, were these white ones, which I had for the first time when I went to Jamaica,
Uh-huh.
which was very different than like it had a different consistency than a sweet potato did, and everything, and was fantastic. But yeah, if you go to the grocery store, it's always like now they've gotten to be like where they'll label them. Sometimes they'll say yams, and sometimes I assume that they're telling me that that's a yam and it's a different than a sweet potato, but I don't know that I would know. So
Yeah.
I think our culture just has this tendency to appropriate different words, and we use it for something that it's not necessarily what it was historically, but that's what we use it to identify things that are commonplace for us today.
well, it's just like that. We don't that the cinnamon we get here is really not cinnamon. It's
Keep
really
going. I'm learning so many things today.
it's similar. It's called cassia, and it
Mm.
that and we always say that the cinnamon we get here is American cinnamon. It's not the same cinnamon that you would get, let's say, from India or Sri Lanka or some of the other countries where cinnamon originally came from. It's a lot bitier and true cinnamon, and cassia is much sweeter. It's a little sweeter. So yeah.
Are
So
they both still bark?
they're both still bark,
Yeah.
and they're similar in color, but I mean, I've used the oils, and cassia oil is almost like eating the old Red Hot candies. Like
Yeah.
that's what it tastes like. And cinnamon is just really, really strong. It's cinnamony, but yeah, the cassia is a lot sweeter. So, but we don't usually get in this country. We don't get cinnamon. It's actually cassia.
Yeah, that's interesting. One of my first business endeavors in the third grade, um, I discovered quite by accident with a friend, they had this tincture of cinnamon oil that you can get at a pharmacy. Okay.
Mhm.
And they had taken toothpicks and soaked them in this tincture of cinnamon oil. And so I made a business out of that. I started, bringing them to school and just giving them to kids. And the next thing I knew, they were giving me nickels, for a little bag of 10 of them or something like that. And it was expensive. This tincture oil was almost $1. Back in those days, a buck went a long way. I mean, that would probably be two candy bars, a couple of comics, a big quart of soda, et cetera, et cetera. Or you could get the tincture, which would make you probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 by the time you were done with it. Not bad for a third grader, the entrepreneurs.
No, not bad at all.
Well, it would make your mouth go numb a little bit, but oh well.
Oh yeah, clove oil will do that. Just automatically numbs, but that's what anesthetic came from for dentistry was clove. But
That's
yeah.
very, very similar. And I think they both have very distinctive tastes, which they're not off-putting, they're both wonderful tastes in my opinion. So what are some traditions that when you get together, say, we'll keep it on Thanksgiving for a minute. Is there anything kind of unique and special family wise that y'all do, or things that you used to do and you don't do so much anymore?
I mean, the only thing that comes to we don't do it. The meal is the special part of it, but, like, my mother did it, like, she could do it with her hands tied behind her back for the longest time, and then she started getting nervous doing it.
Yeah.
So, we took it on, but and now it's enjoyable again because everybody brings a side, it's not all on one person, but my mother did it, like, literally, she could have done it with her hands tied behind her back and all comes out at the same time, all perfect and stuff like that.
Yeah.
One of my lovely traditions, though, is I love to make a shepherd's pie out of the leftovers. So I it's all layer, 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 and then because it's hot, it's all hot, 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 hot.
Yeah.
It comes out in a casserole, and I do that the next day. So with the leftovers, it's my leftover shepherd's pie.
Cleaning the turkey carcass has always been a gathering, two or three of us in the family the next day, my daughters and me, and my wife would be busy doing something else, but we'd be stripping the turkeys off the bones and that sort of thing to get it. Some of it we would freeze when we had really big turkeys, and then we got to the point later on when they got older, we didn't have leftovers for more than a day or two afterwards. It just always seemed to get eaten because you could have turkey sandwiches, you could have turkey and gravy over mashed potatoes, just on and on it goes. But one of the things that we started doing when I was a small child was we would have our Thanksgiving uh, as a family with my mom's older sisters and all their kids. And some of their kids are 10 or 12 years older than I am. I've got an older cousin who's going to be 80 this coming year. And it's really kind of sobering because he looks fantastic. He doesn't look like an 80-year-old man at all. And so we'd go out and we'd play touch football. And so I was 5 years old the first time that we did this. And they say, okay, just get over there and block so and so, block your cousin. And the two of us would be like, running up to each other, going, making muscles and faces and all that. No, that's not how you block.
Well, I'm laughing because my grandmother, my mother's mother she was the one who always like stripped took all the meat off after the meal. And when I tell you there was not one thing, like there was nothing on this carcass. It was just like, I mean, it was amazing. And it would be like you had no idea that there was that much left. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, and then her big thing was then she would freeze it and make soup, use it for soup.
Yeah.
Like she would freeze the carcass and then use it for soup afterwards. But um yeah, it's just those but I think my favorite commercial is like, where, the day after where they talk about like, flaming turkey wings, you know, like all the different things that they would
Turkey
make.
croquettes,
Yeah. It's like another turkey.
turkey
So,
pate. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because we've always my mother was dirt poor. She was the next to the youngest of 8 children. Um, and my grandfather, had a good job as an auto mechanic, and he used to go hunting during lunchtime, and he'd shoot pheasant, and he'd go fishing. And I've got these beautiful pictures of him, with about a dozen pheasants hanging from his, the side belts, and maybe 20 trout that are all, I mean, a good foot and a half long or longer, on a stringer with a cigarette hanging out of the corner of his mouth. And so the joke is that Hollenbeck women really know how to get all the meat off of any bone. So I don't care what you have, if there are bones involved, there chicken, turkey, whatever, ribs, there will not be anything that could be identified as meat on any of those bones afterwards. We believe that's a genetic trait. So it's kind of refreshing to hear that happens at your house too.
Yeah, we always in our family we used to always say that it was genetic to like ice cream because everybody, like my grandmother, my other grandmother, it was just like this thing. Like everybody loves ice cream, probably more so than any other dessert. And we always say it's genetic.
Well, I don't know about you, Lisa, but I can get behind that. You think about all of the pies, and this is a great memory because early on, I met my mother-in-law. The first Thanksgiving was roughly a month after I met my wife at a dorm party, and of course, I got invited home that quickly. Of course, I was living in the dorm anyway, so we might as well. And so we went to their house, and she asked me, she said, "Bill, what kind of pie do you like?" I said, "Pecan." And she said, "Oh, pecan." She said, "We'll just see what happens." She made 3 pecan pies. So I was eating pecan pie for the whole rest of the month of into December, almost to Christmas. And then for the rest of our time together, she moved in with us. I mean, we met in 74, and then she moved in with us in 83 after my father in law passed. Every single year, there's the best pecan pie that you ever had in your entire life.
Mm.
And I asked Jan the other day, we were just talking about this, and I said, "What do you think she did that was so special?" And she said, "I don't know. I think she just followed the recipe on the side of the Caro, jar, or
Mhm.
the bottle. And it just came out great every single time. I've never had a better pecan pie made by anybody. And I've
It's love
ordered them.
that she's in it. It's
Yeah.
love. Mhm.
Yeah, that's an incredible ingredient that is really difficult to commercially duplicate.
Mhm.
Although Paula Deen does a halfway decent job.
Mhm.
My grandmother made this chocolate chip cake, which it was like a pound cake. It was amazing, and everybody in the family tried to learn how to make it, but she
Yeah.
came over from Germany, and so everything was weighed, like they weigh eggs, like that kind of thing. And
Mhm.
and when she passed away, like it died with her basically because no one could ever. Like my mother must have sat there like a dozen times, like watching her make it, try to write it down, would go home, try to make it. I mean, it was good. It was just never the same.
Yeah.
It was just this unbelievable, like it was rich and dense. And so we didn't need a whole lot, but it was really good.
Yeah. Yeah. So desserts really, it's not something that I eat a lot of.
Mhm.
And I rarely have a birthday cake for me. And maybe a couple of times a year, if we go to somebody else's house for a birthday, I'll have a small piece. Um, I will break my sugar dessert fast for pecan pie almost anytime.
Mhm.
I don't see it that often, but when I do see it, it's good.
Yeah, I was
That's
never.
one of the things I for my birthday, my mother, I thought it was something she created, but it's right on the Bisquick box. It's just a velvet coffee cake that's right on the box, and
But
I asked her to make it for me still.
there are those intangibles, though, Lisa, as you were just saying, the love. There's no commercial way to duplicate that I'm aware of.
Nope.
No.
Kind of neat. So, um, my stepmother has had COVID. She was diagnosed a week ago Monday, a week ago today, as a matter of fact, and she's much better. The first 2 days were really bad for her, and I got the her sons all lined up to go and get her some Paxlovid, which they did, and so thank God they did, and they got it into her quickly enough so that it really helped with the symptoms. And at 85, this is not a disease that you want to mess around with. And it really is. It is a disease for people that are at risk. So I said that because she's going to be done with both, with everything associated with COVID before Thanksgiving now. And I can't wait to spend time with her. We got into this habit of playing mini golf every once a week,
Oh,
and then going to lunch together. And she is a big one for dessert. Skinny as a rail. I mean, she's got to be like, I don't know, 5'4". And if she weighs 85 pounds, that's a lot. So I'm always trying to get more chocolate into her and candy bars and whatever that's bad for somebody who's 20, 25 years old. It's not bad for an 85-year-old. So we could have a very special Thanksgiving.
Mm.
We don't know yet. We'll just have to see how it goes. And the facility where she is has been kind of in quarantine. I mean, you can dash in with masks on, but who wants to walk into a place with 200 people in it where 18 of them have COVID and you don't know where they are?
Mm-hmm.
So we drove down and sat outside her window in the back. She's in Mystic. Her window overlooks the Mystic River, and she can actually see the Mystic Seaport and the bridge in Mystic on Main Street. And so we just went out there and sat. And I was getting ready to call her, to tell her to look outside, and I'll be darned if she didn't call us and say, "I see you."
oh wow.
You know?
Oh.
Yeah, we drove an hour to surprise her. And she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, we came to see you. We'll probably go get some lunch afterwards and pretend like you're with us." And she said, "I would love to have you come in for lunch." She said, "But you can't." We can't have guests right now. And I said, "That's why we're out here. We just wanted to see you smile and wave at you and talk to you on our cell phone."
They have some good ice cream shops in Mystic, that's for sure.
Well,
They do.
Bill mentioned the one that I grew up going to, and that was Shady Glen.
Oh,
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
We used to go there all the time when I was a kid. It was, and I don't know, there was something about it because we'd go there. I remember my father had this unbelievable sense of direction, but he would make believe he would get lost. It took me a long time to realize that he wasn't. That he was probably never lost in his life. And we would always, in some way or another, end up at Shady Glen. Like every Sunday, that was like the thing.
It's a great tradition. Yeah, there's, in addition to the ice cream, they have a cheeseburger there that is second to none.
I've heard that.
Well, I mean, it's such a simple thing to do, and it's kind of unique because nobody does it. And essentially, they just get a really hot grill. They put 4 pieces of cheddar cheese on it. They let it melt down, and then it cooks hard on the grill, and that's what you get is this crispy cheese. It's wonderful.
Mm.
I've never had to apologize to anybody for taking them there.
Ah,
Yeah, I haven't been there in years and years, but I remember it.
Do you ever play that game on Thanksgiving? What are you thankful for?
Hmm.
And everybody goes around, and the way we used to do it in my house growing up, and it was my mom's idea, was we would all pick something that we were thankful for, and then go around. The next person would say something. We'd do this until we ran out of things, you know. And there was always the proverbial jokester. My brother Tommy would always say, "I'm thankful that I don't have as smelly feet as Bill does," or something like that, rather than being something real, But he was wonderful. I mean, he used to play outside all day long. He used to go hunting with a BB gun all through the woods all day long. He would come home at night, and I'd have to pick the peas out of his nose, because he'd fall asleep in his dinner dish. And what we were really thankful for is that we all had each other. That was more than anything. It was the biggest thing. There were 8 of us around that table, and we would have died for each other at any moment. That didn't really last all that much when we got into our 20s and beyond, because for some reason that started to break down when other people got involved with the chemistry of the nuclear family. And of course, my mom and dad split up. But I'll tell you one thing, I tear up thinking about, just how much we demonstrated to each other every day how important we were to each other. And that's, to me, I think the best argument for family. If you can be in that zone, even for part of your life, maybe you're not there all the time, but if you can be in a zone where you're just completely thankful that where you are, and you're completely happy with what you have, and you're happy with what you don't have. And that was kind of us.
It's interesting because probably one of the hardest times in my life, but was so thankful, was the week of Shiva, when after my dad died, when we all stayed together. I mean, we all
Right.
slept at my brother's. And I don't know the last time we all had like were at the same home for an extended period of time as adults. Maybe one would be, or we'd come and go for a meal or whatever, but not staying, with each other. And I was so thankful. Um, my brother, my oldest brother, who, is a lot more, will show his feelings a lot more than my middle brother. Like, I mean, cried when when I was leaving. It was just this feeling. And that, and in those circumstances, whether you get along or you don't get along, or however, everything seems to slip away, and it doesn't seem to matter anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember who the author was, but The Big Chill was kind of, that dynamic, but folks that had all graduated from college together. And we had those kinds of get-togethers in Florida when, I would say, through 2004 to 2010. Not usually at my dad's house, but we had 3 huge houses in Florida at that time: 7 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, 15 by 30 swimming pool. So we had lots of room for 20 people or 22 people. And then we would all stay up all night long, either in the pool or not. And all the women, 2 of my sisters had husbands that were 20, 25 years older than them. And they just took delight in beating these men at phase 10. And then there was this other game called Slap. I don't know what it's really called, but it's if you get something wrong, the person closest to you, and sometimes all of them, would just fall on you and slap your hand. And I didn't like that game for some reason, but the older husbands had to submit, and we would talk.
Mhm.
And there was one time where, at 5 o'clock in the morning, my sister and I, who's not here any longer, were out in the middle of the swimming pool, and she was asking me questions about when we were children. And I actually felt like I had a responsibility to remember things that I didn't remember. She would ask me about something that was like really important to her. And I said, God, I wish I remembered that. I said, tell me more about what you remember. And then she would.
Mm.
And the funny part of it is that after that time, she never asked me about those particular things again. She was able to, express them in such a way that she was kind of complete with them. And they were, oh, yeah. So, like, we'll move on from here. And she accepted that I didn't remember. And at first, that kind of peeved her, but then I said, well, look, I'm 40 some years old here. I said, wait until you get old.
I was gonna say, little did you know, yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there's one miracle about the holidays each year, and that is however you spend it, being able to spend one more. Just to mindfully um, appreciate, the kind of the unique privilege to be around it, one more time, to where there's some kind of interest and or feeling and or opportunity to have great memories.
So that's what's tough for me right now because it will be my friend's last one.
Yeah.
And I get all I can think about is that aspect. So yes, I will be 10 times more grateful this year, but all I can think about is that she knows it's her last kind of thing.
Been there a couple of times with different loved ones, and I think when you get into the moment, knowing you for who I know you to be, you'll be present.
Oh, and I plan on it. I was just there last weekend and I'll probably be there next weekend
Yeah.
or weekend after Thanksgiving to help out again, but we'll see.
Yeah, that was I was just talking about that with somebody about, being the caregiver and being able, and as hard as it was, being so thankful that I had the opportunity to do it. Uh, and thankful to a friend of mine who, when it was really hard, and she said, well, just think you have the opportunity to do it. And that totally like shifted my mind to this, was like such like to a place of being grateful for something that was so challenging,
And that's
which
what, because I talked to her husband during the week and he said, people keep offering to help. I said, you have to let them help you, Dennis, because that's what we need to do. And then I said, so I'm going to come over Saturday. And then suddenly he invited two other people to come over, and that. So, I mean, nothing felt better to me than doing that day. I mean, we worked our butts off, but we cleaning the room, getting the rooms ready and stuff like that. And my brother-in-law did the leaves and stuff like that with the husband. And so it was just, but it felt so good to be able to be there, to do something.
Sure. Sometimes the greatest generosity has nothing to do with giving at all. It has everything to do with receiving, which
Hmm.
which sometimes we all struggle with. Even something as simple as a compliment. But if somebody really puts themselves out, oh no, don't do that. Don't worry about that. I'll take care. No, you don't understand. This is what feeds me right now. This is what lifts my heart. This is what makes me, part of this process and a stakeholder here as opposed to a watcher. It's in the action. It's not just in the talking.
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, I don't envy you the dicey moments. And I think I can't speak for our listeners, but I can tell you from my perspective, I think Jan and I have lived up close and personal, what that feels like. And you never get used to it, in my opinion. It's not something that I've ever taken for granted that this just might be the last time, you know? I've kind of felt that the last 6 or 8 years when I've mowed my lawn too. late into the year where I'm mowing leaves. It's like, wow, we've been here for over 40 years. And what if this is the last time I ever mow this? Either because I can't anymore, or because we don't live here, or because something else happens, Just a little bit of catharsis.
Yeah, well, I think that I don't know. I think as life, as we realize the frailty of life, we
Okay.
realize,
Yeah.
that this could be, you know, that each moment is precious.
Yes.
No, it's definitely, my gratitude for everything is definitely shifted into a greater realm, that kind of thing. And I'm even more like, how much I like to do, but that part of it was realizing that how short and sweet, life is, and I want to make the most of every moment. So, and with her diagnosis last year, and then, now the ultimate diagnosis, it's just reinforced that again. So, but yeah, I am eternally grateful for, and it's nice to have Thanksgiving right smack there and have a reason to say it all.
Yeah, it's so interesting how we need a reason.
I know. I was just thinking that as it was coming out of my mouth.
I was like, why do we need a reason except that we do? Yeah, and or we most of us do. And and I think that that's been something that's been very much on my mind lately. Was talking about doing a whole thing on gratitude this week on Friday. For well, it will be a Zoom event instead of an audio event, and this whole idea of gratitude and gratefulness and how you know telling people you appreciate them every day versus you know just like
Once a
telling
year.
people once a year. Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I think my friends have gotten used to me telling me them I love them every time I see them. And my brother is not a big one for saying I love you. It's just not in his nature. And one
Hmm.
time he asked me about it. He says, "Why do you always say that?" And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what. We're not sure we're ever going to see each other again after today. I really want you to have the last thing that you remember of me, if you're still standing and I'm not, is that I said that I love you, which is what I really feel." And he got teary-eyed.
Hmm.
And you know what he said? He said, "Damn it, Bill, I love you too." Yeah, it's kind of an interesting, and again, that word has it's like what a dodecahedron die. It can be everything from odd to um, kind of worth spending more time on, to coincidental, to funny, to interesting. Can mean a lot of different things. It's a utility word, in my opinion.
Mhm.
However, it's not a bad crutch word. And, in every situation where it's good to not have the answer sometimes, to go further with another question and to just really dive into it a little bit more. And when my brother said, "I don't know why you do that," I don't think I could have told him why I did that before he asked me.
Mm.
So that was kind of a blessed thing right there,
Hmm.
you know? It's just two human beings talking to each other. Not too shabby.
Well, I find that with our conversations too. We were talking about we have no idea, and I feel like sometimes that's why I like until you ask her to bring it up, wouldn't have wouldn't have known necessarily, or maybe wouldn't have been as obvious to me.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you're like, oh, it's like a little. I don't know. I want to say light bulb because it's not. That doesn't even feel right. Like more like a realization versus a light bulb.
Mm.
I think of those experiences as being ones where we say yoga reminds you like it polishes the mirror. Like there's a fog and it's kind of like just keeps polishing and different things are revealed. And that's how I feel like the conversations are. It's just revealed to you something that you probably knew on a level, but haven't necessarily verbalized.
I think there's also something about new language being invented with the same words, where there's a certain understanding that kind of comes out in this moment because there's a connection. And a half hour from now, you might not be able to recreate that or even remember exactly what it felt like.
Mm-hmm.
But in the moment, it's kind of cool, you know? It's no big deal. However, there's a little bit of clarity there or a little bit of, familiarity. Yeah, I get that. So here we have been. Eric, you're going to have a lot of fun putting a title on this one. Thanksgiving. We're going to call this one Thanksgiving, okay?
There you go.
Home for the holidays.
Mhm.
And in the meantime, thank you, lovely ladies, for coming out yet again. Any final thoughts that you'd like to put out there?
Have a happy Thanksgiving, whoever you're with.
Yep, whoever you're with, and just be thankful.
Yep. And in a world where you can be anything, please be kind. So between now and Thanksgiving, I'm counting on all of you to get this homework done, and that is to reach out to somebody in your life and just let them know how important they are to you and how much your life works because they're here. And then tell somebody about what that was like. So in the meantime, once again, and still, we are lighting the candle. A world that definitely works. Damn it. Be well, happy.
Have a good week.
Yeah.
Bye for now.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a world that works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us each week, as well as the rest of the network, at exvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.